I'll keep going. So academia.edu it's a platform for academics to share research papers. And we have about 2.7 million users. We're adding about 14,000 academics a day right now. Very focused on scale. In January, we were adding about 4,000 users a day. So we've actually tripled our daily growth in about 3 or 4 months. I'm going to be talking in this presentation about building a new reputation system for science. So the scientific process is broken, and this was the insight that I had when I was finishing my PhD at Oxford. There are various aspects of this brokenness and these inefficiencies. The first one is that peer review is very, very slow. It takes 12 months to get some research out. And it's also not a very robust process. People often think, well, it takes so long because it's such a high-quality process, and science is so important that we need to delay every publication by 12 months to just vet it a million times. It turns out that we're not vetting it a million times. It turns out that during that 12 months, it only gets reviewed twice. So there are just 2 people who are expressing their sentiments on a paper, and they're acting as gatekeepers for, let's say, in machine learning, you might have 10,000 people studying machine learning, and you have 2 gatekeepers. It's really not a good system that 2 people should be allowed to express their sentiments for a community that large. Another aspect is that because the way that the scientific credit system, the reputation system works, academics, it's all about publishing or perishing. And that means publishing papers in journals, publishing in fancy journals like Nature, Science, Cell, and so on. And you can't publish data sets in journals. You can't publish videos in journals. You can't publish code in videos. There's a lot of a scientist's output, actually, that just doesn't get shared right now because the journals don't publish that kind of output. And the scientists think, well, why should I even bother to I mean, basically, 75% of the world's scientific data doesn't get shared right now because scientists think, well, I'm not going to get any credit for it. It's not going to boost my reputation. A third aspect, which has been covered a lot in the media, and probably everyone's familiar with this, the big episode a few months ago was Aaron Swartz episode. And basically, people are getting increasingly irate about the fact that taxpayers fund all this research. Basically, taxpayers spend about $200 billion every year globally on funding academic science. And then all the results of that funding ends up behind paywalls, and the taxpayers then have to pay $30 a pop to read a paper. That money is not going to the scientists. It's not going to the peer reviewers. It's going to the journal publishers, and people are starting to think, hold on, what value are they adding that allows them to restrict access to people who funded this research? So a lot of people think, well, how do we change this system? And the diagnosis that I've made is that I think it's fundamentally a reputation problem. I think that scientists are so concerned to get in Nature that they will do all kinds of things like hand over copyright, refuse to publish data sets, submit themselves to this extremely slow peer review process in order to get that line item on their resume. Because they know that when they go up for tenure or a grant, the grant committee is going to be saying, how many publications do you have in these fancy journals? And that's how they'll be evaluated for the grant application or the tenure position. And I think we need to rethink, just as you're seeing in loads of aspects of the internet economy, you're seeing reputation being reimagined by websites. GitHub has its own reputation system. Stack Overflow does. Even Twitter has signals that reflect how well a particular piece of content is trending on Twitter. And in the academic world, we're seeing a reinvention of the way that research outputs are being evaluated. And I think this is going to I think that fundamentally, if you want scientists to do something and take some steps towards a more efficient system, you've got to provide them the incentives and those sort of carrots for them to do that. And that's what we're working on. So I've already mentioned that we've got 2.7 million users, adding about 14,000 users a day at the moment. And we have 7 million, over 7 million monthly visitors. All the content is open access, so people can read the papers without signing up. We just overtook, as a sort of sign of the times, scientists used to share their papers sort of via this middleman, the journal, and they would sort of outsource their distribution to the journal. And increasingly, they're using platforms like academia.edu where they can have a direct connection with their audience. And one sort of, I don't actually have the graph to show this, but one interesting graph is we just overtook Nature in traffic. Nature has about, which is probably the premium scientific brand in the world. They have about 5 million monthly uniques. And We just overtook them a couple of months ago at 7 million monthly uniques. The three biggest journal publishers in the world are Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley, and they're all about 14 million monthly uniques. So there's just a huge, I mean, academia.edu launched 4 years ago, and if you look at the growth trajectory, you can see there's a real sort of trend in favor of academics saying, yeah, I want a direct connection with my audience. I want to share my papers on academia.edu. So this is, I'm going to run through what our site offers. This is a profile. This is Stephen Prinker's profile. You can upload your papers and allow people to follow your work. They will be notified in their newsfeed when you publish new papers, and it's all absolutely instant, obviously. No 12-month time lags there. You get analytics about your audience, and this is a really critical aspect of the site. It's changing. It's allowing you to, for the first time, see how many people have read your paper. If you ask a typical professor at Harvard, how many downloads did you get in the last 30 days, they would love to know that stat. They would love to know the size of their readership and what countries they're coming from. But historically, they haven't had access to that. And we're providing those kinds of metrics via this dashboard. One interesting consequence of this is quite a few of our users are using these analytics to get tenure and jobs. So this is a quote from a user. The more evidence that I demonstrate of impact, the more likely it is that the promotion committee will realize the different ways in which impact can be shown. So he's a psychology professor in Ireland who's up for tenure. And he uses analytics to sort of embellish his application and show that there's a kind of wide variety of impact that his research is having. Academia.edu's analytics prove to some of our committee members that what they help fund, the work we produce from such funding, actually gets looked for, read, printed, etc. One can glean from Academia.edu's analytics new ways of conceptualizing research impact. So these analytics are starting to have a material impact on the way people think about their research. In terms of monetization, I think one of the challenges of a space like this is getting to scale. If you really want to change, we've raised about $6.5 million, and we've spent most of that money so far on growth, as you can see in the growth numbers. Long term, I think that there are a lot of interesting ways I think you can monetize science. Historically, people have monetized scientific publishing using readership fees, so a kind of a paywall on the reader side of things. And it's sort of like $30 a paper or something. And a typical university might buy a site license like Harvard for, let's say, $10 million or $15 million for access to all the journals. I think that those paywalls, honestly, the days are numbered on those paywalls. And I think that there's a slight movement at the moment towards like an author-pay system where you have to pay to publish your research. Long term, I think that scientific publishing will be like Twitter and Facebook and WordPress, i.e. the authors don't pay anything and the readers don't pay anything, and all the money is made from ancillary services. So what are those ancillary services? I think that data is going to be a huge part of it. I think that if you take a company like Pfizer or generally the R&D industry, which deploys around $800 billion a year in R&D capital, there's a huge demand for sort of tracking early stage research. What's coming? If you take, I don't know, every month you get about 60,000 biomedical papers published in the academic literature. So if you take kind of March's cohort of papers, a company like Pfizer would absolutely love to know which of those papers are trending in real time, which ones are popular amongst the top scientists. Now, in the past, those scientists have printed out those papers, read them in the laboratories in untrackable ways. And so there's been no way you can, if you wanted to say, what are the top 50 Alzheimer's papers published in March, or the top 50 Parkinson's papers published in March, there's just no way of getting that data. You just couldn't ring up all the scientists on a daily basis. But as this activity, this reading activity, sharing activity is moving online, you're going to be able to do a simple SQL query and find out these sort of trending research areas. And I think data is going to be, I think there should be a lot of ways in which the sort of new form of scientific communication gets monetized. But the sort of trending papers is the one that we're focusing on. So 30 seconds to go, and keep in touch. If you're interested in learn more about the space and hear more about the trends, I love chatting about it, and please come up to me afterwards.